8:37 on the Grandy Group. Major Garrett filling in for Brian Neiman today. Got John Fund's last column dated February 10th, 2011, 100 years ago. Yeah. James Webb left the Senate. John Kyle has left the Senate. The CPAC convention has intervened. We got to get an update from John Fund
Mubarak
himself.
Was still in power.
Mubarak was still in power. John, fill us in. You were at CPAC, right?
Yeah, I did take off a little bit of time for Valentine's Day, so give me a break.
All right, fine. You're totally excused. But do you send any Valentines to anybody at CPAC? Anybody emerged as a real prospect in your view?
Yeah, I think there were several winners. First of all, some of the lower-tier potential candidates, Haley Barbour, John Thune, Tom Pawlenty, gave very good speeches. They showed that they can handle themselves. They can combine Reaganite optimism with solidly conservative positions. They scored. I also think Mitch Daniels has a very interesting strategy. He started out last week by telling people, if I'm run, my letterhead is going to blow the door off this race. I will have more fundraising connections than you can possibly imagine.
Wow.
And then he proceeded to be coy, saying, well, look, my family is very cool to this candidacy. I may not run. I won't decide till May. And then he gave a very remarkable speech Saturday night. He did not pander to the crowd. He gave a very adult speech. He did not even mention the social issues. Remember, he got in a lot of trouble by saying we should have a social truce in this country because of all of the fiscal crisis we have. And he gave a very sobering talk, very well delivered, basically saying conservatives have to grow up if we're going to convince people that we should replace President Obama. We're going to have to recognize that we have to take serious action on the deficit, but we also have to be open to the second and third best way to save this country because time is short. It was a remarkable speech because normally a candidate throws out red meat to the crowd. I think he was throwing out gristle in some cases.
John, let me ask you about Mitch Daniels for a second, because there are three things that he has said in the last 8 or so months that make me wonder if, attacked on these three bases, he would have any difficulty in nominating primaries and caucuses. One, the truce, you've mentioned that. Two, he said, at least intellectually, and perhaps he was speaking only in that context, a VAT is something he thinks ought to be discarded, value-added tax. And third, he said, I'm not going to take any pledges during the primaries. I'm not going to take a no new tax pledge, which is a very important part, or has been historically, of the primary and caucus process. Taken together, do you think any of those things, or individually, could pose a problem for Mitch Daniels?
Yes. On the other hand, I think there will be a part of the electorate that will respect his candor and his refusal to knuckle under to political pressure. Look, there's two battles in the Republican 2012 race. There's the establishment primary, and there's what I would call the evangelical primary, the true believers versus the people who want to win. And there's lots of overlap. But I think Mitch Daniels is clearly the major threat that Mitt Romney has. And a lot of people like Mitt Romney, but they're not sure he can win, and they're worried about the flip-flopping. With Mitch Daniels, there's not going to be any flip-flopping. He's already up front saying, I'm not going to give you everything you want.
Mm-hmm. Is there a bridge candidate between those two camps in your view, John, or anybody who looks like they could bridge that gap?
Oh, yeah, I think yes, but I think the initial primary is internal. It's before we get to Iowa. Mm-hmm. And I think that there are potential bridge candidates, John Thune, Tim Pawlenty, various others. But first, I think we're going to have to figure out who the establishment candidate is, where the big money is going to go, where the consultants are going to line up, and in the evangelical primary, whether people like Sarah Palin or Mike Huckabee run. Because remember, there's a lot of people who say they're making too much money, they can't afford to run for president.
John, a substantial part of your career has been devoted to understanding how elections work, actually work, organizationally, structurally, legally. So here's a question I have for you. It seems to me with the way Republicans have changed the rules and the proportional allocation of delegates in all contests leading up to April 1st, we don't know how each state is going to do that, but we know it won't be winner-take-all for those early contests leading up to April 1st. To me, that says the person who is best organized, or the persons who are best organized, are going to have the best chance of solidifying support during that early stage and then wrapping it up after April 1st. Do you have a sense yet, at the grassroots level, who's got a leg up on the organizational fight?
Well, clearly Mitt Romney has a campaign organization in place from 2008. He's clearly going to play in Iowa more than he did last time. You'd have to give him the early head start. On the other hand, the caucuses in Iowa are completely different from the later primaries. There are many examples in presidential politics where somebody who spent the time and energy to organize the caucuses, which take a lot more effort,
Right.
did not do well in the later primaries, which required a lot more money and a lot more media attention. So I think it's way too early. I do believe that we are going to see a primary train wreck because the calendar is completely messed up. The Republican primaries are supposed to be pushed back into late January, early February, but there's nothing that binds states to do that. So I don't think you can threaten states anymore with loss of delegates because you know what? They know that eventually the Republican nominee at the convention is going to seat them.
Right.
So I think you're going to have a scramble as to a bunch of states trying to leapfrog over each other, and we may see a mess that won't be resolved, and we still may see primaries and caucuses in Christmas and New Year's.
Let me ask you one more question before we let you go. Is Chris Christie even possible as a Republican candidate in your view?
Very unlikely, because I think he has the smarts to figure out, I've only been governor of New Jersey for 1 year. Mm-hmm. I probably shouldn't run that quickly on such a thin record. He's got a good substantive record after 1 year, but 1 year as governor, he himself has said, I'm not ready to be president. How in the world can you run for president if you're publicly announcing you're not ready to be president?
An excellent question.
I don't know how you pull off that hat trick.
I don't know. I would ask the current president of the United States how you can do that. Particularly
but he hasn't had the candor to announce that.
Yeah, that's of course.
And he believes, he believed from a very early age he was ready.
All right.
Believed during the campaign. I heard it all the time.
I think in the womb he believed it.
All right, John.